She began engaging in activities that left Zuri utterly bewildered, her actions weaving a mystery he couldn't quite unravel. This strange new game she introduced was a world apart from the lively, laughter-filled football matches he cherished with his friends at school. At just 10 years old, Zuri was still discovering the wonders of primary school, his heart brimming with innocence and an insatiable curiosity. He lived for those moments on the playground, where the thrill of kicking a ball with his buddies under the warm sun filled him with pure joy. And when he wasn't chasing after a football, he could often be found lost in the pages of his beloved storybooks, where fantastical worlds and daring adventures awaited him, sparking his imagination like nothing else. However, a significant portion of Zuri's days was spent returning to an empty house after school, as his parents were often at work. Mr. and Mrs. Ama owned a bustling shop in the local market, and they poured their hearts into their work, striving tirelessly to provide for Zuri. They had grand aspirations for him and wanted nothing more than to ensure he had a good life filled with opportunities. The school bus would drop Zuri off around 3 p.m., and he would find himself alone until 6 p.m., when his mother would finally return home from the market. "I'm so bored being at home alone," he lamented to his parents one evening, his voice tinged with frustration. "We're truly sorry, Zuri," his mother replied with a gentle smile. "It's only for 3 hours, and we must work hard to ensure we can pay for your school fees and everything else you need." Zuri understood the necessity of their long hours, but there were moments when he wished they could spend more time together as a family. Then one day, Mrs. Amar came up with a solution that she believed would make things easier for everyone. "Zuri," she said cheerfully, "Auntie Nia, our neighbor, will look after you until we come home." Auntie Nia was a young woman in her late 20s who lived alone next door. She always wore a bright smile and had a friendly demeanor, which made Zuri's parents feel comfortable leaving him in her care. "Okay, Mommy," Zuri replied, his voice brightening. He was familiar with Auntie Nia and appreciated her kindness. She often surprised him with small treats and snacks. Thus, it was decided that Zuri would start spending his afternoons at Auntie Nia's house after school. Auntie Nia's home, though small, was always tidy and inviting. She greeted Zuri with warmth, presenting him with a plate of food and a radiant smile. "Zuri, come and eat. How was school today?" she would ask, her tone filled with genuine interest. Initially, Zuri felt a bit shy in her presence, but Auntie Nia had a knack for storytelling that soon put him at ease. She even allowed him to watch his favorite cartoons on her television, and before long, Zuri found himself looking forward to his time at her house. One particular day, Auntie Nia surprised him with a special gift. "This is for you, Zuri," she said, handing him a brand new football. "You remind me of the little brother I never had." Zuri's heart swelled with joy as he accepted the gift. "Thank you, Auntie," he exclaimed, a big smile lighting up his face. However, as time passed, things began to shift in a way that made Zuri uncomfortable. One afternoon, after he had completed his homework, Auntie Nia settled close to him on the couch. "Zuri," she said, her voice low and conspiratorial, "let's play a special game. It's just for us, and you must promise not to tell anyone, okay?" Zuri was taken aback, feeling a wave of confusion wash over him. He didn't quite understand what she meant, but her smile seemed innocent enough, so he hesitated before agreeing. However, as she guided him through this new game, he quickly realized it was nothing like the fun he had with his friends at school. The more they played, the more confused and uneasy he felt. "I don't like this game," Zuri finally murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Don't worry. You will love it very soon," Auntie Nia reassured him, her tone almost coaxing as she instructed him in ways that made him feel lost and frightened. The sounds she made, the expressions on her face, and the strange sensations he felt left him bewildered. He was torn between wanting to understand what was happening and a deep-seated instinct that told him this wasn't right. The game continued for what felt like an eternity, and when it was over, Auntie Naya leaned in close and whispered that it was their little secret, a promise that he should never tell his parents. Although Zuri was deeply troubled by the events, he felt paralyzed by fear. What if his parents didn't believe him? What if Auntie Nia found out he had confided in someone? Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, Zuri dreaded going to Auntie Nia's house. The once warm embrace of her smiles now felt like a mask, one that hid something sinister underneath. He longed for the comfort of his parents and wished they could be home more often. Each visit to Auntie Nia's left him feeling more anxious and uneasy. The laughter and joy he once felt were replaced by a heavy cloud of discomfort. Even his beloved football lost its charm, overshadowed by the constant worry gnawing at him. As time went on, Zuri began to notice something strange happening at night. He would wake up to find his bed wet, an accident he hadn't experienced since he was much younger. Initially, he brushed it off as a mistake, perhaps due to drinking too much water before bed. But when it happened again and again, he felt a deep sense of embarrassment and confusion. How could he explain this to his parents? The thought of discussing it filled him with dread. One evening, after another bedwetting incident, Zuri sat alone in his room, feeling lost and despondent. He wanted desperately to confide in his parents, but the fear of their disbelief and the weight of his secret kept him silent. The following day, Auntie Nia summoned him to her house again. A knot tightened in his stomach. He didn't want to go, but with his parents busy at work, he had no choice. As he arrived, he mustered the courage to speak up. "Auntie Nia," he said quietly, I don't feel so good. I've been wetting my bed." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Don't worry, Zuri. It's nothing to be concerned about. It happens sometimes," she said, but her voice lacked the comforting tone he had hoped for. The bedwetting continued, and Zuri's frustration mounted. Why was this happening? Why did he feel so anxious all the time? He felt trapped in his own mind, unable to escape the turmoil swirling within him. He sat quietly in his room, staring blankly at the wall, his heart heavy with unspoken fears. That evening, when his mother returned home, she looked exhausted, her arms laden with shopping bags. Zuri followed her into the kitchen, gathering all the courage he could muster. "Mommy," he began softly. "Yes, Zuri," she replied, still preoccupied with unpacking groceries. He hesitated, his heart racing. "Mommy, I need to tell you something. It's about Auntie Nia." Before he could finish his thought, his mother sighed heavily. "Zuri, not now, please. I've had a long day and still need to cook. Your father will be home soon. Can't this wait?" His heart sank at her words. He looked down at his feet, feeling the weight of his unspoken truth slip away. "Oh, okay, Mommy," he mumbled, retreating to his room, feeling more alone than ever. But the truth could not wait. That night, Zuri woke up once again to find his bed wet. He stared at the damp sheets, panic swelling inside him. "What's happening to me?" he wondered, tears brimming in his eyes as he curled up under the blanket, wishing he had found the courage to speak up when he had the chance. The next day at school, Zuri felt a million miles away from his classmates. They laughed and played, but he felt like a ghost, drifting through the day without truly being present. His teacher, Mrs. Lara, noticed his silence and approached him with concern. "Zuri, is everything all right?" she asked gently. Zuri opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. He simply nodded, feeling the weight of his secret pressing down on him. As he sat quietly at the back of the classroom, staring blankly at his notebook, his thoughts spiraled in turmoil. Mrs. Lara, observant and caring, could see that something was amiss with her once lively student. After the lesson, she dismissed the class for break, but called Zuri to stay behind. He froze, anxiety flooding his senses. Slowly, he gathered his books and approached her desk, his head downcast. "Zuri," Mrs. Lara began softly, "I've been watching you. You're not the same boy I used to know. You've been quiet, and your work isn't like it was before. Is something wrong at home?" He remained silent, staring at the floor, feeling the tightness in his chest. Mrs. Lara leaned closer, her voice filled with warmth. "Look, I'm not here to get you in trouble. I just want to help you. You can tell me anything, okay?" Tears welled up in Zuri's eyes. He wanted to speak, to share the burden he had been carrying, but the words felt heavy, stuck in his throat. No one had ever asked him how he was feeling, not even his parents. Finally, he spoke, his voice trembling. It's Auntie Nia." Mrs. Lara's expression shifted to one of deep concern. "Auntie Nia? What about her?" Zuri swallowed hard, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "She makes me feel uncomfortable. She does things I don't like, and it scares me," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Lara's eyes softened with compassion. She reached out and gently held Zuri's hand. "Oh, Zuri, I'm so sorry you've been feeling this way. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me," she said carefully. "Listen, this is very serious. You shouldn't have to carry this alone. I need to help you, but I must involve adults who can protect you." Zuri's eyes widened with fear. "Please, don't tell my parents. I tried, but they didn't listen. I don't want to get into trouble." Mrs. Lara squeezed his hand gently. "You're not in trouble, Zuri. None of this is your fault. I won't tell them without your permission, but I must talk to someone who can help you feel safe again. Do you trust me?" Zuri nodded slowly, a flicker of relief washing over him. "Good. I promise to handle this carefully. You're very brave for telling me," she reassured him. Later that day, after her classes, Mrs. Lara took the initiative to visit the school principal and the counselor. She explained everything Zuri had shared with her, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. They all agreed that this was a matter that required urgent attention. It was decided that they would call Zuri's parents to the school for a private meeting. When Mr. and Mrs. Amma arrived, they were clearly confused and worried. "Is there a problem with Zuri's studies?" Mr. Amma asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Mrs. Lara took a deep breath, knowing she had to approach this delicately. "No, sir. This is not about academics. It's more serious. Zuri has shared something with me that deeply concerns his safety." Zuri's parents exchanged worried glances. "What are you talking about?" Mrs. Amma asked, her voice laced with anxiety. Mrs. Lara proceeded to explain Zuri's words, making sure to be both firm and gentle. She informed them how their son had been feeling scared and uncomfortable around Auntie Nia, their neighbor. Mrs. Amma's face turned pale, and Mr. Amma leaned back in his seat, stunned into silence. "Oh my God! The bedwetting, the quietness," Mrs. Amma murmured, realization dawning upon her. "We thought it was just stress." Mr. Amma clenched his fists, anger and frustration boiling beneath the surface. "How could this happen right under our noses?" Mrs. Lara leaned forward, her voice steady. "Right now, Zuri needs your love and support. We must report this to the proper authorities to protect him and any other child who might be in danger." Mr. Amma nodded slowly, his expression resolute. "Yes, we're going to the police right now." When they returned home, Mrs. Amma sat Zuri down, tears brimming in her eyes. "Zuri, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I should have listened when you tried to talk to me. I was too busy and I failed you. But I promise, we're here now. We will protect you." Zuri looked up at his mother, feeling a mix of emotions. He nodded slowly, relief and gratitude flooding through him. His father placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "We are going to make sure Auntie Nia never comes near you or any other child again." For the first time in weeks, Zuri felt a sense of safety wash over him. Early the next morning, Mr. and Mrs. Amar took Zuri to the police station. He clung tightly to his mother's hand, his small fingers trembling with apprehension. The building felt cold and serious, and the officers in uniform appeared busy and stern. A kind-looking female officer approached them. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Mr. Amma cleared his throat, his voice steady, but laced with anger. "We need to report something serious. It's about our neighbor, Auntie Nia. She has been harming our son." The officer's expression turned serious. She crouched down to Zuri's level, offering a gentle smile. "Hello, young man. You're very brave for coming here today. Would you like to talk to me in a quiet room?" Zuri glanced at his parents, and when his mother nodded reassuringly, he agreed. In the private room, the officer listened intently as Zuri spoke slowly about how Auntie Nia made him feel uncomfortable and how he had started wetting the bed because of the fear. He spoke softly, but the weight of his truth filled the room. The officer took notes carefully, her expression compassionate. "Thank you for telling me this, Zuri. You've done the right thing. We are going to take care of this." Later that day, 2 police officers knocked on Auntie Nia's door. She opened it, surprise etched on her face as she saw them. "Good afternoon, Ma'am. We need to speak with you about a serious complaint. You are under investigation for harming a child," one officer stated firmly. Auntie Nia's demeanor shifted instantly. "What? This must be a mistake," she stammered, attempting to maintain her composure. But the officers had heard enough. They handcuffed her and led her away, the shocked expressions of neighbors watching from their doorways. From his window, Zuri observed the scene unfold, feeling a strange mix of relief and lingering fear. It was real now. Auntie Nia was gone, and she could no longer hurt him. Days passed, and the atmosphere in the house felt different. Zuri no longer had to go next door after school. His parents took turns staying home or picking him up early. One afternoon, his mother sat beside him on the couch, her expression tender. "Zuri, how are you feeling?" she asked gently. Zuri shrugged. "Better, but sometimes I still feel scared." His mother enveloped him in a warm hug. "That's okay. Healing takes time, but we're here for you." In addition to their support, Zuri's parents arranged for him to meet with a school counselor. The counselor was kind and patient, and gradually, Zuri began to open up about his feelings. The bedwetting incidents became less frequent, and eventually, they stopped altogether. Months later, Zuri found himself standing on the football field at school, laughing and playing with his friends. His teacher, Mrs. Lara, watched from a distance, a smile spreading across her face as she observed his joyful spirit returning. Though he still remembered everything that had happened, those memories no longer held him captive. One day, after class, Zuri approached Mrs. Lara. "Thank you, Ma," he said quietly, his gratitude evident in his eyes. She smiled warmly at him. "You're welcome, Zuri. I'm proud of you." With a grin, Zuri ran off to join his friends, feeling lighter than he had in a long time. At home, his parents were more present than ever, and their family felt whole again. Auntie Nia was gone, but the scars she had left behind were healing. Zuri had come to learn one invaluable lesson. He was never alone, and no matter how hard things got, there would always be someone ready to listen and support him through the darkest times. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please consider liking, commenting your thoughts, and subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much, and see you in my next story.